This is a video that's been triggered by many questions over the past few weeks since I started calling for people to start documenting their own stories and documenting the stories that were being told by their parents and their grandparents and their older uncles, older cousins, knowledge keepers. I like to call them knowledge keepers. And we have our own knowledge keepers in our own family as well, and I've been spending time also talking to them about what happened in their past, and primarily it's because they come from a generation that is older than myself and older than those younger than me, and they have a version of accounts that we don't readily come to listen to or talk about or discuss even in our own families. And a lot of times those people who hold the knowledge don't really appreciate the value of their knowledge, and that's what I've been trying to stress for at least 1-2 years since I started talking to a few older people. And in 2018, no, it was 2020, last year we went to Popondetta, and we were covering a story around the Mount Lamington eruption of 1939, I think. And there were a lot of old people, very old people, in their 70s and 80s, who had witnessed the Mount Lamington eruption. And one of the men I talked to, an old fella with his wife is still alive. He's a former teacher, and he talked about what he saw as an 18-year-old, as an 8-year-old who had been there when the Mount Lamington eruption happened. And he spoke impeccable English, and he talked about, he described the manner in which the mountain had erupted and how his uncle had gone to the mountain and had died. He also told about how he and his sister, his younger sister, had tried to escape the Mount Lamington eruption in those days. And it kind of dawned to me then that these were people who had history that was unwritten. They were not in history books. They were not in our history books, but they were held by them as custodians. So it gave me the idea that, why don't we start encouraging younger people to talk about, go and find their own knowledge keepers. Go and find their own knowledge keepers, and those knowledge keepers are in your families. And if you start talking to them, they will tell you a whole heap of history, or versions of history, that you didn't realize they were holding on to. And this, I think he was 79-year-old was telling me about how he had run away from the Mount Lamington eruption. They had walked for several kilometers from inland Oro province all the way to the beach at Oro Bay, and where there was a care center. It so happened that the care center was where my grandfather had worked as an aid-post orderly, caring for those people who had been affected by the disaster, and 3,000 people died. So each piece of that story is held by different people, and it's like a whole library. It is a library, but it's a living library. And that library, there's a saying that when an old person dies, a library dies. And it's a serious thought, if you come to think about it, and that's why the knowledge keepers, as I call them, are very important. And that old fella will probably not be here in the next 5 years, and his people who were with him. There was an old lady who was a nurse. There was another one who was a driver for the priest. Interesting characters. The driver of the priest had tried to rescue his girlfriend, the girl that he liked. So he went to his he went to her house, her parents' house, and said, look, why don't you just, because she was carrying a baby. So he said, why don't you just give the baby to their parents and then come with me and let's run off. The mountain's going to erupt. And the way he told it was, in a very hilarious fashion. He's, arthritic, he can't really walk well, he's hunchbacked, but the cheeky sense of humor of that 18-year-old just shone when he talked about that story about trying to get his girlfriend to run away with him. And he's an important knowledge keeper. If you know Kolintaimbari, they come from Kolintaimbari's village. So we spoke to them, and we spoke to a whole heap of other people, and they gave us versions of unwritten history, rich versions.
Rocket made it.
So storytelling, as I wanted to say this afternoon, is very important for a society like Papua New Guinea, where much of the history is unwritten. And that is why younger people, and I keep saying younger people in universities, younger people in high school, even encourage your kids in primary school to go and talk to their grandparents, and they will be able to record it, because the kids who have access to mobile phones, have access to tablets, are able to use technology with ease. You don't have to prompt them. You can give them a project and encourage them to go and record one piece of that history, just one piece of that history. Tell me where you grew up, or what was it like when you were growing up, or tell us where the sea level was in terms of climate change, tracking climate change. Tell us where the sea level was when you were little, and the grandparent or that knowledge keeper will be able to impart that knowledge to a younger person. And humans have been doing this for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. 200,000 years, at least that's what the scientists say. So 200,000 years we've been transmitting knowledge through stories. So it is an essential part of our very existence. It is an essential part of our very existence. It's just that we live and breathe storytelling in a Melanesian society that we don't really place emphasis on it in this day and age where we have the technology to enhance that storytelling. And there's a generation of people, a generation from my parents' generation to my kids' generation, that generation who are my kids who are now in their teens and in their 20s. There's a knowledge gap. There's a huge knowledge gap where people like us who grew up in urban areas, urban towns and cities, and in government stations, there's a disconnect between us and the place where our parents grew up. And storytelling is crucial. It's super important in order to bridge that gap between the life that our parents had and the life that their grandparents have now. That bridge has to happen through storytelling. And it's, for me personally, I think it's a mission that every Papua New Guinean needs to take up. It's a mission that every young person who has access to a mobile phone needs to take up and start documenting those stories, because you have multiple stories, 800 different languages. That knowledge is very rich knowledge, embedded in languages, embedded in legends, embedded in how languages have traveled, how people have migrated. And if you start talking to older people, they will tell you where you came from. I mean, you can start in Papua New Guinea and end up in the Pacific, end up in Vanuatu and Fiji and the Solomon Islands, and you'll see that the story trail that goes from Papua New Guinea, out of Asia to Papua New Guinea to Australia to Fiji to Vanuatu, and all those places that have a relationship to Papua New Guinea and Melanesian culture. That loss of traditional knowledge is alarming because a lot of younger people don't speak their language anymore, and with the loss of languages, there's also a loss of an incredible amount of knowledge. I've gone ahead within my own family, gone ahead and talked to our older cousin, and I call her a knowledge keeper as well, and I've suggested to her to start a language school because it's become crucial that our kids and their kids start learning our language, or if they know about our language, start learning the root meanings of the words, start understanding why we behave in a certain way, why this person is a relative, why a certain dance is danced that way. Yes, Barbara Maxim. Yeah, so I suggested to her that she should seriously think about doing a language school, even if it doesn't seem important now. The value of it will be realized years into the future when we have grandchildren, when we have great-grandchildren, and they don't have as strong a connection as we or our parents had with their villages. And one of the stories I try to repeat when I talk to universities is the story about how when I spoke to John Momis, one of our founding fathers and one of the authors of the Constitution, the deputy chair of the Constitutional Planning Committee, and he told me an interesting story about how his uncles and his father used to tell him not to cut trees beside a river. And he said they used to tell us that, suppose you cut him diwailo side below wara and by wara badai. That in itself is a story, but it's also a story about conservation and ancestral knowledge. It's very important knowledge. I mean, we've just come back from COP 22, where 72 people went. They probably talked about a few things of value, but I think that ancestral knowledge that John Momis explained was very, very important because it's old, it's passed on through generations, and how is it passed on? It's passed on through storytelling. And in this day and age, we've got multiple methods of storytelling, multiple platforms, incredible amount of storage. It's not like in previous years where like 10, 20 years ago or 30 years ago where you had a cassette tape and you had to keep it very safe. Now you've got you can store information on a cloud and it'll be safe forever, as long as Google doesn't delete it, or the cloud owners don't delete it. So what I've encouraged my nieces and nephews and my kids is to go out and talk to their grandparents, talk to their uncles, talk to their aunties, their older cousins who have knowledge stored in them, as living libraries. Because if they go and talk to them, it gives them a perspective of their own culture. It gives them a perspective of their roots. It gives them an understanding of what needs to be done going on into the future. And it's a crucial element of our culture that needs to be kept alive. Papua New Guineans are natural storytellers. You put two Papua New Guineans together, they will tell a story, or they will tell several stories. It's important that this is taken a step further and given serious thought, serious conscious thought, so that the knowledge that we have or already have, or pieces of it, are put together and kept in a repository. Even if you're doing it for your own family, that's fine. I mean, your family, if you're doing it for your family, talk to your parents or your grandparents, or talk to them about where they grew up, because it's an important part. You don't want to do it at a eulogy when he's already dead, or when she's already dead, and you write that story, that beautiful story, and read it out at a dead person's funeral. You want to do it when that person is alive, so that that story is kept alive. It's passed on from one generation to another. A lot of times we write the most beautiful stories at somebody's passing. We talk about his life or her life, and we talk about how wonderful that person has been, his achievements or her achievements, and we forget to tell that story when that person is alive. And it's sad when people start when people actually do that, because that person is not there to verify. He or she is not there to add value to it. You're picking it up from various second-hand sources and putting a story together, and it's very valuable that you talk to older people, and it's, for us in Papua New Guinea, it's become crucial, because a lot of the knowledge, the ancestral knowledge that is held by older people, are relevant in this day and age. If you go up into the highlands, or if you go to coastal areas, the seasonal patterns, the weather patterns, crops that thrive in drought or thrive in wet seasons, are all stored in the minds of people. They're all stored in the languages that people speak. And unless you understand the language, unless you speak to an older person, you will not know what to do in a drought, what to do in a flood, and all that knowledge is there. For instance, when we went to Popondetta, we were talking to people who saw the Mount Lamington eruption. They were telling us that we had, the older people were telling us, or had told us, that if you see this such and such happening, like animals going into the bush, flying foxes flying away from the jungles near the foot of the volcano, that's when people should also leave. And that's traditional knowledge, that's ancient knowledge passed on through generations, through storytelling. And it's important that all that is documented. Coming to the methods of storytelling and how to capture it, a lot of people have talked to me about, or asked me about, running workshops for how to tell stories. The workshops that you should be asking for are not how to tell stories, but how to capture them, and how to transmit them, and how to share them. That's what I can do. I can't teach you how to tell a story, because you already know how to tell a story. We've been doing it for thousands of years. We know how to do it. So if you have a phone, that's the first primary tool. Use it first. I mean, shoot a video. Instead of shooting a TikTok video, shoot a video that documents history. And then create a Facebook page for yourself. If you're doing it for your family, fine. I'd encourage families to do it, because Papua New Guinea is made up of family units, large family units. My suggestion is to start with your own family unit. Document your family tree, where your family came from, what language you speak, where that language came from, what are the similarities between your language and another neighboring language. And you'd find that you'd find incredible things, because I've done this for myself. My mother's language is very similar to Manamotu in Medang, very similar to Kwanua, and these are languages in totally different places, but have words that are very similar. And if they speak very slowly, I can understand a few words. And encourage young people to do it, because it's exciting stuff. You need to be really inspired to do it. And if you start doing it, it's addictive. You start doing one, and then doing another, and then doing another, and it's inspiring stuff when you start doing it and encourage another young person to go and do it. go and find out about your roots, encourage your friend, and you will find that it's an incredible amount of richness that you draw on your own culture and on another person's culture, and see how see the similarities and how all of it links together. See how different they are, because that beauty is in the diversity, and the diversity in this country is incredible, and it's an incredible country. Thank you very much, and have a good day.